Hyper Aware of a Spiritual Realm by E.N.E. Chapter 5. Dancer. I used to tell myself I could never be a dancer when I was a young teen. It makes me sad because I know a lot of that feeling came from feeling so unconfident in my body. I hated how I felt in my own skin. I didn't feel pretty. I wanted to be a kid again. I felt over-sexualized. And I wanted to have a boy's body most of the time. Teenagehood is brutal for a lot of us, even if there isn't additional trauma. I was such a free spirit when I was little. I didn't care or think about what others thought. I would dance around the house if I wanted to, make noise, play pretend. It's difficult when things suddenly feel intense, overwhelming, and there's shame involved. Sometimes I would dance to my favorite music all by myself, but I couldn't fathom dancing with or even around other people. The first time I more seriously considered joining a dance class was when my friend invited me to hers. I think I was 17 at the time. I had been part of gymnastics when I was between 9 and 12 years old, but was never part of anything other than that for years. I tried to be part of various groups or communities throughout my teens, but I really did struggle with feeling like I didn't fit in. I wasn't really able to let my hair down in any social situation, especially where I didn't know anyone. I just still preferred to spend time watching shows, playing video games, and creating my own worlds, sometimes doing photography photo shoots by myself on long walks in the woods where I lived. At the time my friend invited me to join her class, I was excited, but for one reason or another it had been canceled, so it wasn't quite the timing yet. The fact that the thought of dancing was exciting was a big deal though. This was probably the first time I was genuinely excited about the idea. I remember during this season I was gradually feeling drawn to my Celtic roots in many ways. It felt like a joyful part of myself that had been missing. I started to fall in love with Gaeilge, the Irish language, and it's like a fire began to burn in my soul. Some kind of electric energy and desire to dance to this music that was awakening something dormant in me. I think it was the next year around St. Patrick's Day. I went to see a local folk band with my family. At the time, trying to sit still through this dancing energy music almost felt like torture. I think this was the moment I knew I had to learn to dance. I couldn't help myself anymore. I celebrated my high school graduation, and one of my best friends surprised me by showing up. We danced for my celebration, and it was my first time learning how to do reels. I remember stringing glowing lights outside on an early summer night in June, and I decorated our concrete pad with chalk designs. I wore a flowing dress and danced barefoot like Rapunzel. I was still mentally such a mess in so many ways, but there's something about this time briefly in my life that felt so magical to me. My muscles were ungodly sore that night, and I think I had made myself sick from dancing so hard. I didn't realize that soreness would become a common thing in my life later on. It was early autumn. I was 18 years young. I stepped into an unfamiliar building with my mom. 2 different ladies introduced themselves to me. One of them mentioned how she also had an instrument called a hammer dulcimer, just like me, so we had somewhat of an instant connection. The other introduced herself, and that she would be teaching me in the beginner Irish dance class. At the time, I had no clue we were the same age. I'm sure no one else realized how old I was either with my rosy, round baby chub face. I remember wearing the wackiest outfits, and I'm sure I looked like a child. I ended up dancing with children, too. The first day was like a love at first sight situation, but with dancing. I, of course, continued through that fall and winter. I was not expecting to be in a performance so soon, but we had a Christmas celebration, dancing at a retirement home. I remember coming home feeling like that was one of the most joyful and fun experiences I'd had in the longest time. From someone who couldn't imagine herself as a dancer when she was young, to now a young lady performing for strangers. What a strange and surprising thing to happen. Soon after this, my family went through a hard period of grief as well as illness. I ended up missing an entire month of dancing. Even though I recovered, my health was never the same. My fatigue was more severe. I also think that all of this loss we went through made my chronic depression worse. I was ready to quit dancing at this point. Why should I even continue, I thought. My mom encouraged me to keep going, and I'm thankful I did. We tried various protocols and tools for my health, but weren't entirely sure what was going on with my body. Over time, spring came again, and it honestly felt like a miracle. I ended up dancing on an actual stage for the first time ever. Some of the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. Stunning costumes, dresses, and glittering capes. Was this actually real? I felt joy and peace for the first time in years. I felt like life was worth celebrating. I remember getting to wear a stunning dress with deep shades of purple and blue. I actually felt beautiful. For years I felt unconfident. I would judge my body harshly, and at this point my hair was thinning due to health issues. It was difficult to deal with such overwhelming feelings like this. I was only 18. But on this special day, I would curl my hair, do makeup, wear things that would make me sparkle and shine, and spin in my dancing shoes. It's like I finally got to have my girly childhood dream, even though I was technically a very young adult at this point. I still was a very lost girl, just wanting answers and meaningful experiences. I still lived in my imagination most of the time. I lived in storybooks and other worlds. My dream was still to be a writer and an artist, but dancing was welcome to stay, and I embraced it in the years to come. I met such sweet and beautiful friends at dance. Dancing with other people makes you bond in a unique and special way. I remember how the studio was always beautifully decorated around Christmas time. There were unfortunately a lot more hardships in my family that would happen soon enough. It was much uglier and life-altering than the grief from the previous year. The very end of my teenage years was more brutal than I expected, but somehow I had a feeling deep down that crisis was inevitable. I ended up feeling chronically dissociated, as I mentioned before, but at the same time, I think it gave me a certain kind of empathy for other friends I knew who might be dealing with something horrible in their family. It obviously wasn't ideal, but I'm still grateful to this day that the dance studio felt like my only safe space. I of course continued to stay, but it was so much harder to feel joy. It was more of an escape now, a distraction and a coping mechanism. Dancing was still a blessing, but I was not in a good headspace. Flash forward another year in the winter time. I unexpectedly met someone new at dance, a friendship I never saw coming into my life. I was beginning to feel some excitement and hope again, mostly because I mentioned in a previous chapter I was reading through a workbook that changed my life. This became the year that dance was canceled, of course, for a long while, and I think I had an existential crisis. I'm pretty sure I asked God if this was a sign that I should stop being a dancer. There was so much unknown, but what I did not know is that once you are a dancer, you always will be, no matter what happens. God answered unspoken prayers in my heart, and I did end up dancing again. A lot had changed, so it was different, and I was teaching part-time now with my new friend I had just met back in the winter. And of course, this was the beginning of my health decline. I remember being terrified to tell anyone I was sick out of fear that I would be accused of having COVID, a common virus at the time. So instead, I had panic attacks that would get worse and worse. I refer to my last years of dancing as the darkest years. I felt as though I was dying in so many ways, but I stayed to see my best friends. However, one of those friends was aware of my struggling and declining health and didn't want to watch me keep suffering. Even though it was possibly the biggest heartbreak of my life, I'm grateful that the dancing, performing, and working to death came to an end. It would have been wrong if I had been put under any more pressure to give something I simply didn't have. Only a true friend would refuse to make me do something unfair to myself. Now I realize that's what love is. I wish I could have seen and felt it more clearly at the time. I definitely went through the stages of grief at this point. It was the hardest year of my entire life. Thank God it was the time in my life I would finally get medical help. I was honestly beginning to lose all hope. It was a season of survival, uncertainty, grief, as well as a reckoning of all that mattered to me, what I valued, what I was learning, and who I was. I began writing again, and not letting go of the cathartic nature of creating my musical projects. It took a while, but on days where I felt able, I would dance in a room by myself. I had learned how much I loved lyrical dancing styles as well as belly dance, even during the years I was still actively doing my other classes and performances. Being able to dance by myself whenever and however I wanted gave me a sense of freedom and healing back into my life. I had no desire to perform for anyone else anymore. In a sense, I felt a lot of bitterness, mainly because I associated my last dancing experience with faking how well I was when I was so ill. In some ways, I wish I had felt more seen by more people. It seemed so many were oblivious. There were very few who knew the truth, though. It was a strange combination of shame, embarrassment, and also hurt and confusion. I felt like I didn't want to call myself a dancer anymore, and if I did, it was a secret again. Only I got to know when I danced, and I would do it only if I felt like it. It felt like I disappeared off the face of the earth. I spent most time either in bed or surviving horrific symptoms. I couldn't work at my odd jobs anymore, so I was losing money. The added stress made my illness worse and harder to find any relief from. I struggled with envy and jealousy towards practically all of my friends, no matter how much I loved them or even how kind they were. It just didn't feel fair. Why did this have to be my life? After everything I've been fighting for, why, God? Why would you let this happen? I could feel the enemy whispering lies of hopelessness to me again. It seems this was a time a lot of people might refer to as a dark night of the soul. But the anguish of the illness I was experiencing made it much uglier and harder to recover from. Today I have fallen in love with dancing again, but I am at peace with not performing or teaching anymore. Most of the time. I still dance for myself and as a source of therapy. I'm proud of what my body can do even though I'm still ill. I can't be an athlete anymore, but it doesn't matter. I'm not sure that's what I want anymore or even value. I value artistry, emotion, and deep healing. You don't have to do sports, run marathons, or even be a dance teacher to have any of those things. I value health, a medical system that actually cares about human suffering, aid for disability, real help for mental illness, education on women's reproductive health, stable relationships, and real love and support. You don't have to be fit or active to live a deep, fulfilling, and meaningful life, nor do you need it to enjoy what the purpose of dancing is at its core. It was meant to be art and expression, and that's what it will be in the end. If I hadn't joined dance, I wouldn't have met the kindred spirits that I did. People who still inspire me to this day, and it has nothing to do with their dance skills or abilities. I realized what I valued most in life by the conversations I would have with people. I had moments where I played like a little kid with friends and giggled out of shyness. I laughed even in the midst of a lot of pain because I knew I had people who cared. Dance changed my life, for better and for worse. I am grateful, though, grateful for it all. God knew what he was doing. A quote by Nathan Iyer. In my heart, I know you care. In my suffering, you're there. He is still good.